I bring greetings from the free state of Florida. It's great to be with you. Thank you very much. Keith mentioned my family's Pennsylvania roots, and we're proud of that. He did mention also the little trip that we took as 12-year-old kids to the Little League World Series in Williamsport, Pennsylvania. And back then, only 4 teams in the entire country could make it there. We were in Dunedin, Florida, which most people never heard of, but we set as our goal, we're not just doing this season to do it, and we're not just doing it to mess around. We're going to get to Williamsport, and that was our goal. And by golly, we accomplished that goal, and being able to go there in that beautiful stadium had a huge impact on me. And I think that it just taught me, swing for the fences in life. Anything you do, set your sights high and get it done. And I think it's impacted me in different ways, but definitely when I became governor, I think I brought that same mindset. I got elected governor in 2018 by 32,000 votes in a state that has 20+ million people. We won by about a 0.5 percentage point, and Florida, for the 10 years prior to that, had been a 1-point state. Governor's races, president races, 2010, 14, 16, 18, 1 point. And so I get in, and I get a lot of advice about what to do. And people were telling me, you know, you really got to trim your sails, got to kind of ease into this, lie a little low, don't make any waves because it's a closely divided state, and you basically just squeaked in. And I appreciated that advice, but I rejected that advice. My view was I may have received 50% of the vote, but I earned 100% of the executive power, and I intended to use it to advance our agenda. We resolved to lead by conviction, not by polls. I have never taken a poll about any of these issues that I've championed since I've been governor. Didn't on day one and still haven't to this day. A leader doesn't respond to polls. A leader gets in front of issues, identifies what needs to be done, sets the vision, executes the vision, delivers the results, and guess what happens when you do that? The polls change in your direction. So we don't do the polls, we do what is right, and that was our philosophy on day one. We also understood that I could be the best leader in the world or have the best decisions. I could have great policies as governor, and that's important to do. But if you don't have people around you that put the mission first and that believe in what you're doing and don't bring any other agenda to serving in the administration, you're not going to be able to get this stuff executed properly. So we let people know from day one, you're either on the team or you pack your bags. And if you're bringing a different agenda, I don't want you here because this is the people's business we got to take care of. And finally, we said, I am not going to be like some of these Republicans that just sit around. They're all defensive. They're like potted plants. They don't want to offend the media or offend the Democrats. No, we're going on offense in the state of Florida. And we went on offense from day one. And so we did that and worked hard. I'll mention a few of the things we did, but fast forward 4 years later, November of 2022, whereas we had won by a 0.5 percentage point and 32,000 votes, we were able to win re-election by over 1.5 million votes, the largest popular vote margin in Florida history in a governor's race. We earned the highest percentage of the vote that any Republican candidate for governor has ever received in the history of the state of Florida. We were able to flip Democrat counties, urban counties like Miami-Dade County, and not only did we flip it, we won it by double digits. We were able to have a rising tide lift all boats. We now have super majorities in the Florida legislature. We were able to work to elect 29 conservative school board members to school boards across the state of Florida. And we've even done things like flip county commissions. You know, Palm Beach County now has a Republican county commission. You know anything about Florida, no one would have thought that was possible even 2 years ago. And it's important, and we invested a lot of time, efforts in all these other races, because, I'm just one candidate, right? I'm one office holder, and yes, I'm the governor, so I may get the most attention. But at the end of the day, if you really want the state to be solidified for a generation, you got to build a farm team. You got to be involved in all these races. You got to have people fighting for kids at the school board. We can't do it all at the state. So we were able to do that, and now the result has been we took that swing state that was always 1 point in either direction, and we've turned it into a red state. When I got elected, there were almost 300,000 more registered Democrats in the state of Florida than Republicans, and we had never, in Florida history, had more registered Republicans than Democrats. Well, fast forward today, we now have 448,000 more registered Republicans than Democrats. No one's ever seen anything like that. And what that represents is a massive defeat for the left. It's been a massive defeat for the Democratic Party. They did not want to see Florida go red. They threw everything but the kitchen sink to stop us, and yet we have left the Democratic Party for dead in the state of Florida. And I bring this up, and yes, I think some of you got the book. If you didn't, please, hopefully you'll get it. Every week I'm on the New York Times bestseller list. They don't like that, so you can help me with that. But the lesson that we talk about in the book, and I think we showed in Florida, is that voters reward bold leadership. If you're somebody that goes out there and they know where you stand and you're very clear about what you want to accomplish and you deliver results, people are going to have your back. And you saw some of the stuff on the videos where we had to stand up for people a lot over the past 4 years. But President Reagan was right when he said, we need to be choosing bold colors, not pale pastels. And when you stand and you have very clear ideas and you're able to harness those ideas to policy, you respond in an election like we had. But it wasn't just the election that people have voted to vindicate what we've done in Florida. People have been voting with their feet. And if you look at what's happened over particularly these last 3 or 4 years, we've seen a great exodus out of states governed by leftist politicians pursuing leftist ideology. And those places, people are moving more than any other state in the country to the free state of Florida. We've served as the promised land for Americans who've been disenchanted with left-wing government. And I see it in Florida. Every time I go out, someone will come up to me. They leave Chicago, New York. Unfortunately, a lot of people have left southeastern Philadelphia. I see people that have left Philly come to Florida all the time. So you see that, and then you see that in the results. We are the fastest growing state in America. We are the #1 state for net in-migration in America. We're #1 in new business formations. We rank #1 in education freedom. We rank #1 in parental involvement in education. We are the #1 state amongst large states for GDP growth. Of course, we have no state income tax. You all should try that sometimes. It's not bad. We have the second lowest state per capita tax burden in America and the second lowest debt per capita tax burden in America. Florida's economy is over $1 trillion and our debt is $20 billion. Can you imagine if the federal government had such a ratio? We would be in much better shape. And here's the difference between conservative governance and left-wing governance. New York State is the closest state to Florida in population, but we have now millions of more people in Florida living than New York has residents. And yet, even with us having millions more people, New York's budget is twice the size of the budget of the state of Florida. And yet we have better services, we have better infrastructure, higher performing K-12 education, and the top ranked higher education system for public in America. So where is all this money going when they're taxing people? And not only do they have twice the budget, New York City's budget is the same size as the entire state of Florida budget on top of that. Yet where does this money go? They don't treat taxpayers with respect. They're certainly not plowing it into law enforcement because we see crime going through the roof in these places. And so good governance matters. Florida's built for the long haul. Not only do we not have an income tax, we would have no need to have taxes go up because our fiscal is in such great shape. In fact, we have the largest budget surplus in the history of the state of Florida, over $22 billion last year out of a budget of $109 billion. So that's a big deal. We're proud of that. Now, when you come into office, you don't know what's going to be thrown your way. And there's certain things as governor I get in Florida. Yeah, we think we may have to deal with a hurricane every now and then. That's just part of growing up down there, and that's just part of our lifestyle. We get it. But you go back 4 years, people were not talking about that you'd have a pandemic. I mean, obviously, that'd be something that's possible, but no one was thinking that would be something that was likely. And I'm just proud that when the world lost its mind, when common sense suddenly became an uncommon virtue, that the state of Florida stood as a refuge of sanity, a citadel of freedom for people all over this country and across the world. We refuse to let our state descend into some type of Faucian dystopia where people's livelihoods were destroyed and their freedoms were curtailed. No, we chose freedom over Fauciism. We were not supported in making those decisions at the time by the bureaucracy, by experts, by the media, by the left. I even had a lot of Republicans, that were attacking me if you go back 2020, particularly in the summer. And I had a lot of supporters who are like, man, you are getting hammered by the media. They're killing you with all this stuff. You got to just do something to get them off your back, impose a restriction here, do a mandate, close this, close that. And, at the end of the day, my job as governor is to care more about the jobs of the people that I represent than to worry about my own job. And I didn't know how it would shake out. I didn't know politically whether I would be long for the world or not, but I just said as a leader, I've got to just be able to look in that mirror and be satisfied that I'm putting service over self and that I'm making decisions that are the best interests of the state, not trying to protect my own political hide. And so we went through a lot of rough political terrain over those weeks and months, but I'll tell you, we've come out on the other side and people look back and they will say, Florida got it right. We wish we were in Florida during this time. And in fact, not only did Florida get it right, these experts like Fauci got it wrong. They were wrong on lockdowns. They were wrong on masking. They were wrong on saying schools needed to be closed. They were wrong on denying the existence of natural immunity. They were wrong about the efficacy of mRNA shots. They were wrong about denying that the COVID virus came from a lab in Wuhan, China. So my question is, where is the accountability for these people for all the damage that they did to our country? And in Florida, we really served as a roadblock against Fauciism because what they wanted to do, they wanted to basically turn our country into a biomedical security state. And that wasn't going to happen on our watch in Florida. We led the effort, and we're the first state to prohibit COVID shot mandates for school children. That is not appropriate to be doing. We banned vaccine passports in the state of Florida. You have a right to participate in society. You shouldn't have to cough up medical records just to go get a cheeseburger somewhere. And then when both corporate America and the federal government were working in concert to deny people the ability to earn a living based on whether they got an mRNA shot, we called the special session of the Florida legislature, enacted legal protections for Floridians so that nobody has to choose between a job they need and a shot they don't want. We banned the mandates. The scary thing is that these folks are not done. They will find anything they can to try to exert power over you. And in fact, I think it's very clear, if you look back, most of what was being put out was not about your health. It was about them controlling your behavior. So even today, we can't have Djokovic, the tennis star, come to Florida on a plane or anywhere in the United States because they're demanding that he show proof of getting a COVID shot. He doesn't want to get a COVID shot. He's already had COVID. And so why are you doing this? We're one of only a handful of countries in the entire world that is clinging to this nonsense. And I actually wrote a letter to Biden because we had the Miami Open and Djokovic would have played. And I said, you should reverse this, but if you don't, we're looking through the fine print of your order. I don't see that I can't bring him in by boat, so I may do the Bahamas and bring him in. And I would have done it. But not only that, they're clinging to that. They're also now in federal court, in an appellate court, arguing, because we had a district judge in Florida, federal district judge, strike down the federal airline mask mandate. And she's a great judge, and it was a great opinion. Biden has appealed that. They've argued now that the mandate should be reimposed. So they're actually fighting right now in court for their right to muzzle you on commercial aircraft all these years later. So this is just fundamentally wrong. So what we're going to do in Florida, we've already done a lot to protect people. We're going to continue those protections, expand those protections, and make them permanent. You should not be subjected to any of these forced medical interventions. That is your decision about a mask, about a shot, and that's what we're going to do in Florida. I can tell you one of the reasons why we had people flood into our state was because we made it very clear from the day I took office that Florida was a law and order state. And that wasn't fashionable everywhere, but it was the right thing to do. And so when you had the rioting that was going on, the BLM riots in the summer of 2020, we were not taking any chances with that in Florida. I immediately mobilized the National Guard. We dispatched state law enforcement to every corner of the state, and we were ready to react if things got out of hand. We were not going to let cities in Florida burn to the ground. And because we were prepared, because we were serious about it, you didn't see what happened in Minneapolis happen in the state of Florida. In fact, we looked at what was going around the country, and we understood, the left was fomenting a lot of this disorder, and they would likely try to do it again. So even though we handled that, we knew going forward we had to do more. So we signed legislation after the BLM riots to create strong anti-rioting penalties in the state of Florida. In Portland, they will riot, they get arrested, they take their mugshot, slap them on the wrist, and put them right back on the street. In Florida, we say, no, if you riot, you loot, if you engage in mob violence, you're not getting a slap on the wrist. You're getting the inside of a jail cell, because we're going to hold you accountable for that conduct. I'm happy to report that our anti-rioting legislation was actually condemned by the United Nations. So if they're after me, I know I must be on the right track. We also rejected the idea of defunding law enforcement. And so not only you saw it happening around the country, we passed legislation in Florida that said local governments are prohibited from defunding police. Any city council could have 3 yahoos get elected and go on some ideological joyride and do stupid things, but we're not going to let our citizens' safety suffer because of their insanity. So if they try to defund, we put the money right back in the budget and we keep the police on the street, and that keeps our people safe. We reject soft on crime policies like eliminating cash bail and jailbreak legislation, which lets people out of prison early without even completing their full sentences. If you look at what's going on in New York or Illinois or California, you have a combination of all those things where someone's committing crimes, they release them, no cash bail, they go right back on the street, and they commit more crimes before they even stand trial for the crimes they had already committed. That puts people's safety at risk. And that's one of the reasons why you've seen crime spike. And there may be no issue that's caused crime to spiral more out of control in certain cities such as Philadelphia than the election of progressive prosecutors funded by people like George Soros. These prosecutors go in with an ideological agenda. They think it's their role as a prosecutor to manipulate the law, to ignore the law, to pick and choose which laws they will enforce, all in service of politics and pursuing ideology. So we've seen it in places like Philadelphia, where they don't prosecute people the way they should. We've seen it in San Francisco. We've seen it in Chicago. Prosecutors are not above the law. If they don't like a law, then the appropriate thing to do is to resign your position and run for the legislature and try to change a law. You have no right to nullify the law, and they've put so many people at risk as a result of doing that. And now you have this Manhattan district attorney who, his whole platform when he got elected was that he was going to downgrade as many felonies as possible to misdemeanors. He was going to keep as many people out of jail, even habitual criminals, as possible. And he was going to go light on all these things as part of, quote, criminal justice reform. So that's his posture. He doesn't want to charge people with felonies. So now he turns around, purely for political purposes, and indicts a former president on misdemeanor offenses that they're straining to try to convert into felonies. That is when you know that the law has been weaponized for political purposes. That is when you know that the left is using that to target their political opponents. And I can tell you this, these Soros-backed DAs, they are a menace to society. They are a menace to the rule of law. And I'm just proud to say that when we had one of those DAs in Tampa that said he wasn't going to enforce some of our duly enacted laws in the state of Florida, we didn't let that stand. I removed him from his post, and he is out. Part of the rule of law, part of public safety means that you have strong borders and that you're enforcing your immigration laws. If you look at what's happened over the past many years, we're seeing a deluge of fentanyl pouring in to our country. They say only the border town should care about it. I'll tell you, every state's a border state. Pennsylvania's getting fentanyl, Florida's getting fentanyl, and I'm just sick of having to console mothers who are losing kids because they're lacing this stuff with fentanyl, and they maybe make one mistake, and then all of a sudden they lose a child. Biden laughs about fentanyl. He was talking about one family, and he was chuckling the other day there. He doesn't care about the amount of drugs that are pouring across the border. He's not doing anything. He doesn't care about the criminal aliens that are pouring across the border. I mean, people like Maduro in Venezuela, they're emptying jails, and they're sending folks to our southern border. You have people on the terror watch list that are coming across the southern border. That's just not me saying it. That's Biden's own DHS saying that. We even had people affiliated with the CCP coming across our southern border. So this is something that I think states should be responding to. Obviously, the federal government should be doing it. But in Florida, we've leaned in on day one against illegal immigration. They told me, you can't do that in Florida because we have a lot of Hispanic voters there. And I can tell you this, we've been very tough on immigration, and the people that have supported me the most have been Latino voters in the state of Florida. They want strong borders. They want the rule of law enforced. So we've done things like ban sanctuary cities in the state of Florida. We sued Biden, and we have won at the district court level against his catch and release policies because they're not legal. We also have to deal with people trying to come directly into Florida by sea. And so we have boats coming from Haiti or Cuba. And yeah, the Coast Guard, it's their responsibility, and they by and large do a really good job, but they're undermanned. Biden doesn't want to send as many ships as we need, so we're now under a state of emergency where I've marshaled all of Florida's marine resources. We're out there interdicting these boats, working with the Coast Guard, and so far in the last 6 months, we've repatriated 11,000 illegal aliens back to Haiti and back to some of these places. But the frustrating thing about all this is that you don't get much attention, certainly from Biden's administration, the corporate media. A lot of people just don't want to, they want to pretend that this problem doesn't exist. The only time I saw any of these folks get concerned about illegal immigration was when 50 illegal aliens showed up in beautiful Martha's Vineyard. Then they got really upset about it. They don't care that these poor border towns have thousands and thousands of people going through, that the cartels are running the show. They don't care about that. But when you have 50 show up in one of the wealthiest enclaves in the world, an enclave, mind you, that billed itself as a sanctuary jurisdiction. They actually had an office in their little downtown that said, nobody's illegal, we accept everyone from around the world. That's what they were advertising, and yet, when they had 50 show up, did they integrate them in the community? No. They called out the National Guard and they deported them off Martha's Vineyard the next day. These liberal elites want to impose their policies on you, but they don't want to have to deal with the consequences of their ideology or their policies. And we were able to expose that. Texas has exposed it by sending to Manhattan and some of these other places. But I think what's good for the goose is good for the gander. We shouldn't have open borders, but if the left is imposing open borders, then the illegals should go to sanctuary jurisdictions, not to Florida, not to Pennsylvania. And a big part of the solution, no doubt, is the construction of a wall along the U.S.-Mexico border. You need to have a wall because if you don't, you always could have an administration that doesn't care about enforcing it. The wall is a fact of life. People can't just get over it. They try to go around when you don't have the wall completed. And so what I've told people is, we have some experience in construction in Florida. We just had a major hurricane come through Southwest Florida. Some of you may know people down there, have family or friends down there. Major hurricane, and among other things, it knocked out bridges going to Pine Island and the Sanibel Island. The causeway was severed in 3 different places. Now, these were not state bridges. They were not our roads, but the locals were being told it's going to take 6 months to get those bridges back in working order, and so you just have to find a way to evacuate. And those islands would have died if that would have happened. So they came to me and said, Governor, can you help us? I'm like, yeah, I'm going to help. So I got my team together and I said, listen, I don't want any red tape. I don't want any bureaucracy. I don't want any of this stuff. I just want this stuff built. So let's start now and get it done. And so we took over the job for Pine Island, and they feared that they were going to be out for 6 months, and we rebuilt the bridge in 3 days. And so I just raised that because I am willing to send my Florida people down to the southern border to build the wall. Put us in, Coach. Come on, Joe. We'll do it. We'll get it done. Another important part of the rule of law is the integrity of our election system. And in the state of Florida, we are now viewed as a model for election administration, transparency, and integrity. And I can tell you, if we were here 20 years ago, that would not have been how people viewed Florida, because we had some problematic elections, particularly the 2000 election. So one of the things I've done, we removed some of the supervisors from South Florida who were not doing it right, got better people in there, but we've made major legislative changes. We have banned ballot harvesting in the state of Florida. We've banned the use of Zucker bucks in the state of Florida. We've banned sending out unsolicited ballots through the mail to voters. And if you do an absentee vote, you have to show ID, just like you would do if you're going to the polls in person. And so voter ID is very important. But then to make sure all of that actually works, we created an Office of Election Crimes and Voter Integrity in state government. We have investigators, we have prosecutors in the Attorney General's office, and they can bring cases when people violate the election laws, because a lot of local prosecutors don't take the cases. So we've already had cases brought against somebody who was in the country illegally and voted, people that have voted in multiple jurisdictions, and we even had people vote who have been convicted of very serious felonies like sexual assault, and you are not eligible to vote. And so the fact that we've done that and people have seen the law be enforced, the amount of shenanigans that we saw in 2022, I've been asking, I was like, what happened wrong? What do we need to do better? And by and large, by all accounts, it was the most efficient, transparent election we've ever run in Florida history. So our approach is working. But here's what I would say, though. I think all states, I think Pennsylvania should mimic what we've done by banning ballot harvesting and all that. You absolutely should do it. And I think how, like, your court got involved in 2020 changed the rules. I think that was totally wrong. I think how other states used COVID to change the rules was totally wrong. And you should try to get it right. But here's what I would say. Whatever the rules happen to be in an election season, we got to play ball with that. We can't tell people that the Democrats are going to harvest all these ballots, but we're not going to do it. No, if it's legal, you have to do it. If Zuckerbucks is legal, you should do Zuckerbucks. You should do whatever they're doing. Don't fight with one hand tied behind your back. Play to win. One of the things I'm most proud of in the state of Florida is that we are really leading on the issue of education. And our philosophy is very simple. Our school system's purpose is to provide children with a classical education, not a political indoctrination. Our K through 12 system, our higher education system, these are funded by tax dollars. These are public institutions, and they must serve the public interest. They are not just playthings for the left to impose their ideology on society. So we're making sure that our education system is moored to the pursuit of truth, to academic rigor, and to giving students the ability to think for themselves so that they can be citizens of our republic, not to impose political ideology or political activism. Now, part of what that means is we honor and support the rights of parents to play a critical role in the education and upbringing of their kids. They have a right, every parent in Florida has a right to send their kid to the best school that they can. And so we have universal school choice in Florida. We have 1.3 million students in choice programs. I signed legislation on Monday, which is going to expand that. And so we've not only done more for school choice than anybody in the history of Florida, we've had the largest expansion of school choice on my watch of anybody in the history of America, and probably anywhere in the history of the world if you think about it. So we're proud of doing that, but we also want to make sure that our schools are focused on what matters and not going off on ideological tangents. So we have banned critical race theory in our K through 12 schools. We're not going to teach our kids to hate our country or to hate each other. We're going to treat people as individuals. We're not going to divvy them up into groups. And we're going to teach history that is accurate, not history that is trying to pursue a left-wing agenda. And part of what that means is you can say you're against CRT, which you should, but what are you for? What's the positive vision of education? And what we've done in Florida is we've put a new emphasis on American civics in our K through 12 schools, particularly our high schools. We now have them taking tests when they're seniors, modeled after the citizenship test that naturalized immigrants have to take. We have strong civic standards so that they understand the basics. And here's the thing. You're going to have students that go into the workforce immediately, to community college, to university. Some will go into business. Some will go into medicine, finance, all these different things. And those are great paths, and people should follow their heart. But every single person that we send out of our school system is going to be called upon to exercise the duties of being an American citizen. And we owe it to ourselves, but also the people that have sacrificed for us to be a free country. We owe it to them to make sure these students are graduating with a foundation, knowledge about what it means to be an American, not just graduating listless vessels who really have no idea of what they have in our country. And so we've done that, and we even have a course now for teachers where they can learn. I've got people from like Hillsdale College, all these great people that have participated. It's a 50-hour course. If you go through that course, you will know the foundations of this republic. I will tell you that. And we give them a $3,000 signing bonus if they go through the course. So it's very important. We also are the only state in the country, I believe, that sets aside one day every year, November 7th, to teach our students about the evils of communist regimes throughout history. We're going to teach about Marxism and Leninism, all the destruction that it's wrought, 100 million dead in the 20th century alone. We're going to make sure our students understand that, partially because they need to understand it, but partially because they will now appreciate being born in this country or being able to be in school into this country. We believe parents have a right to know what curriculum is being used in their child's school, and so we've enacted curriculum transparency legislation. And the sad thing is, some of the things you're seeing in the schools nowadays are absolutely horrifying, that a fourth grader would have access to books that have pornographic images in the books. And here's what we've done in Florida. We've given parents the ability to fight back, but we've also exposed this publicly. You know, the media on the left will say, if you don't want pornography in the elementary school or something, they'll say Florida is, quote, banning books. That's a hoax. That's not true. Adults can get books what they want, but schools, by their definition, have to curate the books that are in the school. You don't have every book in the world in a school. You have like 0.00001% of all books there. So people are making decisions with our tax dollars to put some of this inappropriate material there. So parents have every right to object, and we have every right to not have it. But what we did to highlight how they were lying about this, I did a public event called Exposing the Book Ban Hoax, and we did a video to start the event that just showed what material was being objected to. The local news who were covering it had to cut their feed because it was too graphic and too inappropriate. So my question is, if it's not appropriate for the 6 o'clock news, how is it appropriate for a fourth grader or a fifth grader? And part of what flows from the parental empowerment is it is inappropriate for teachers to be doing things like telling a student that they can change their gender, that they were born in the wrong body. That is wrong, and we do not allow gender ideology in our K through 12 schools in the state of Florida. And it's sad that we even have to do some of these things. I mean, I signed a bill a couple years ago. I was happy to do it, protecting women's sports. Our girls and our women athletes should be able to compete with integrity. And how do you have a situation like you saw in Pennsylvania? You swim on the men's team for 3 years, then you switch to the women's team, and you win the national championship in women's swimming, 500-yard? How is that fair? What about all those other women swimmers? The one that came in second place, she's actually a Florida resident. I did a proclamation saying she was the true champion. She got denied of a national championship. And it's sad we even have to do this, but we've had to go after this practice of doing these gender surgeries and hormone blockers for these minors. They will do someone 13, 14 years old. They'll put them on puberty blockers. They'll do double mastectomy for someone that's 15 or 16 years old. Here's the thing. Kids of that age go through a lot. You don't take off their body parts like that. That is not medical science. That is ideology run amok. And so what we've done in Florida is we've ruled through our medical board, physicians that do that with those minors will lose their medical license in our state. Just that simple. It is ideology run amok. It's woke medicine. It's not real medicine. We've also understood that higher education plays an important role, but it needs to be focused on traditional academics and not ideological indoctrination. So we've already enacted reforms to tenure for professors in Florida. Now all tenured professors must undergo review every 5 years and can be let go at that time. Our legislature is currently in session, and they are going to be passing legislation, which I will sign, to make Florida the first state in America to eliminate these DEI departments from our university system. They say it's about diversity, equity, and inclusion, but in reality, it's using the university's administrative bureaucracy to impose an ideological agenda. It's not, DEI stands for, the way it's practiced, division, exclusion, and indoctrination, and that has no part in our public institutions. One of the reasons I think we've thrived as being a free state is because we understand freedom is not just about the absence of restrictions, which, yes, many people came down during COVID for that. I would have these leftist politicians would criticize Florida. Leftist hosts on some of these cable networks would criticize Florida. Then, like, the next week, you look down and they're on the beach in Miami or something. No mask, no anything. So, but that's fine. That's part of why we're free. But I think we have to understand that the threats to freedom are not simply as a result of what happens in legislatures. Yes, you got to win those fights. The left is trying to impose its agenda through a wide range of arteries in our society, including corporate America. So we have fought against corporate wokeness. We are going all out against ESG, this environment, social governance. We've banned ESG in our pension investing. We're passing legislation to broaden that and to make sure that Floridians are not discriminated against by banks and other financial institutions because they own guns or they're a Christian or they're a conservative. Woke banking is using the financial might of Wall Street and some of these other entities and using that to try to impose an agenda on you which could never win at the ballot box. They're not accountable to anybody. They simply try to do this, and they try to say that they're for social justice. So we recognize that as a threat to freedom in the state of Florida. We also recognize a threat to government colluding with some of these folks. And one of the things we're going to ban in Florida this year is the idea of a central bank digital currency that they're trying to do. This is something where they want the Fed to control a digital dollar. And guess what will happen? They're going to try to impose an ESG agenda through that. You go and use too much gas, they're going to stop it. They're not going to honor the transaction because you've already bought more than what they think. You want to go buy a rifle, they're going to say, no, you have too many of those, you can't do it. So it's ceding the power of our financial freedom to a central bank, which does not have our interests at heart. So I think all states need to band together, need to say we're not doing this central bank digital currency, and we're going to let you be in charge of your own finances. But what we've seen, whether it's education, whether it's the bureaucracy, whether it's corporate America, is there is a left-wing agenda that is being imposed on our society. And in Florida, we've just said no. We said we recognize this as a threat across the board, and we pledge to fight the woke in the schools. We pledge to fight the woke in the corporations. We pledge to fight the woke in the halls of the legislature. Florida will never, ever surrender to the woke mob, because our state is where woke goes to die. Now, we're proud of the stands we've taken. We're proud of the success Florida has. And one of the things I kept noticing during the last campaign were the vast majority of Floridians were really satisfied and happy with the trajectory of Florida, but they were very pessimistic about the trajectory of the United States of America. And why not? You look what's going on in D.C. You see Joe Biden, weak, floundering leader. He's controlled by the leftist elements of the Democratic Party. You look at what he's done. He has probably done as much as anybody, maybe Jerome Powell at the Fed, to unleash the worst inflation that this country has seen in over 40 years. This is making our country weaker. It's making our citizens poorer. And here's the problem. They've mismanaged this from the start. Massive trillions of dollars of fiscal stimulus, trillions of dollars of the Fed printing money. What do you think is going to happen? Of course you're going to end up having inflation. And so what they're trying to do, they tried to hike interest rates last year. They did that very rapidly, but that's created major problems. And so what do they do when you have problems at a bank in like Silicon Valley, which is basically doing very wealthy people and servicing that community? They make some mistakes. They are not in a good position. So the Fed, Treasury, FDIC, they bail out Silicon Valley Bank. Well, if there was a bank in this part of Pennsylvania that serviced like agriculture or small businesses, do you think that they would have been bailed out under similar circumstances? No. So what they're trying to do with their policies is make all of us deal with the harm, but the elites get insulated from their decisions. And so they've now pumped another $400 billion back into the economy. That is going to increase inflation. And so we've got some look, I'm happy with Florida's economy. We're clicking, but all these other things that are coming on the top with the inflation, the interest rates, and all the regulation, it's causing big problems. And I think, unfortunately, there's likely to be stormy days ahead. Part of the reason is Biden's waged war on our own domestic energy production. We have resources here in this country that we need to be using and using to the hilt. It's an issue of national security in addition to the economy. His fecklessness with the border, I think, has been an absolute disgrace. You have people that are dying by the tens of thousands in our country because of fentanyl overdose. You have criminal aliens that are pouring into the country. And forget about even the bad stuff, just the sheer number of having millions and millions of people that we don't know who these people are, dumped into communities all across America. What does that do for social services, education, criminal justice, all these things? It creates huge burdens, and he's basically just turned a blind eye to all of that. It's been a massive dereliction of duty. And of course, he sits atop an unaccountable administrative state. This is an administrative state that is not answering to the American public. They don't serve the interests of we, the American people. They loom over the people, and they impose their will on the people. You know, Ronald Reagan used to say the most frightening words in the English language, or I'm from the government and I'm here to help. And when he said that, he was identifying the problems with kind of the Great Society run amok, some of the things that happened in the 60s and 70s. He was right about that. I think the difference between his time and our time is, yes, the bureaucracy still does all those things, but the bureaucracy has become weaponized against people that the elites don't like. You look to see the IRS targeting scandal that Keith and I fought against, where they were going after conservative groups. You see things like imposing these vax mandates on nurses and on physicians and on the workforce. Now, the regular workforce got struck down. They tried to impose it on the hospitals, and these nurses would have lost their jobs. What we said in Florida is, you need us to survey our hospitals. We are not going to participate in this. You can pound sand. Hey, they fined me a couple $1 million, but I saved the nurses' jobs, so I'm fine with doing that. But a bureaucracy that through no action of the Congress and your elected representatives, a bureaucracy that just by fiat wanted to impose a rule on this country that you don't have a right to earn a living unless you submit to getting a COVID shot. That is a bureaucracy that doesn't have your best interests at heart. A bureaucracy that colludes with big tech companies to censor truthful information, whether it's during the 2020 election, whether it's about COVID-19. If you were talking about the devastation of lockdowns, they would take your stuff off the internet. They would suppress you. You were called a conspiracy theorist if you said that the virus came from the Wuhan Institute of Virology. Most of the things that they were colluding with people like Fauci with to suppress were the truth. And so they abused their power to try to do that. And then when you see mothers going to school board meetings in Virginia become subject to scrutiny by the FBI because they're concerned about masks and CRT in their schools, you know that this is a bureaucracy, particularly FBI and justice, that is totally off its rocker. Why did we get to this point? We got to this point because Congress has not done its duty to hold these agencies accountable. You have the power of the purse. Don't put the government on autopilot. If they're abusing authority, you use the purse strings. When you legislate, make sure you're telling what needs to be done. Don't give that to the bureaucracy to fill in the blanks. That takes legislative power from we the people to unelected bureaucrats. And of course, yes, you do need a determined and disciplined executive willing to systematically root out these politicized bureaucrats. You have authority, an executive has authority under our Constitution to clean house. You can take 50,000 of them, make them Schedule F, and you can subject them to termination at will. You also can go and find the people that are not doing the job and get rid of them. It needs to be done because otherwise you have a situation, a Republican could win the White House, and yet the left still controls the executive branch bureaucracy. That is not how the Founding Fathers drew it up, I can tell you that. But the weapon, we did that in Florida. We've signed up for it, so we're good. But what this shows with how the bureaucracy's been weaponized, how Soros-backed prosecutors are weaponizing the law against conservatives, is that the left is playing for keeps. They want to make the citizens of this country who are conservative into second-class citizens. And if you look at 2024, if they can win the House and they win the White House again and maybe add a senator or two, what is their agenda going to be? They're going to try to pack the U.S. Supreme Court. They're going to try to abolish the Electoral College. They're going to make D.C. a state so that they get 2 Democrat senators for life. And they're going to federalize these problematic ballot processes, ballot harvesting, as well as eliminate voter ID in every corner of the United States. Now, say what you want about that agenda. It's not an agenda I like. It's not an agenda you like. But that is not an agenda just objectively that the average American is concerned about. The average American wants to see energy prices moderate. They want to see inflation moderate. They want to see more opportunity, education, crime. Those are the things they're concerned about. So this is not an agenda that is speaking to Americans over their kitchen table. This is an agenda for them to ensconce themselves in power for a generation. So the stakes are very high. I think what Florida shows is that if you pursue a bold agenda, if you exhibit strong leadership, you not only can take on the left, you can beat the left. And we have done that day after day, week after week, month after month, year after year. But in this endeavor, there is no substitute for victory. The winners get to make policy. The losers go home. But victory is not easy. It requires demonstrating not just the right frame of mind, not just advocating the right policies, but it requires that you demonstrate the courage of those convictions. Because leadership in this day and age, with how powerful the left is in media and in entertainment and in bureaucracy and all these other things, leadership's not cost-free. When you step out, it could be a governor like me. It could be a mother who just goes to a school board meeting who's concerned with what's going on. They're going to come after you. They're going to attack you, and you're going to have to make those sacrifices if you want to save our country. But I think we have no other choice but to do that. After all, we believe in the founding creed of this country that our rights do not come from government, they come from the hand of Almighty God. We reject the idea that self-government can be subcontracted out to technocratic elites, whether it be in D.C. or Davos, who care little for our humanity but view us as just data points. And we insist on the restoration of our timeless constitutional principles so that our government of, by, and for the people shall not perish from this earth. We have a responsibility to preserve what the founder of our country called the sacred fire of liberty. Now, this is a fire that is burned in the state of Pennsylvania in 1776 in Independence Hall, when 56 men pledged their lives, their fortunes, and their sacred honor to establish a new nation conceived in liberty. It was a flame that burned, a fire that burned just down the road from here at a cemetery in Gettysburg, when the nation's first Republican president pledged this nation to a new birth of freedom. This is a responsibility that we as conservatives have at this time in our history. It's not something that we should shrink from. It's something that we should welcome. We need to be strong. We need to hold the line, and we can never, ever back down. So I can tell you this, I'm proud of what we've done in Florida. We're going to do more, but I have only begun to fight because we are going to save liberty in this country. God bless you all. Thank you. Thank you. Thanks. I'll go down.